Hello, my name is Rob Williams. I love giving Walrus talks. I love Walrus magazine, and I love Victoria. And on that theme, I also love islands. I love island people. I grew up in Comox, and I think we island people have something in common. I think we, as hard as we try to buy locally and shop locally and fulfill our needs on the island we live on, I think we all have this recognition that we have limits and that eventually goods come to us from away, and those goods are brought to us by ship. So I know that there's no point in checking my mail in Alert Bay at the post office on Monday because the ferry just came in and the mail won't be sorted until Tuesday. And I know that Thursday is grocery day in Sontula. We island people know this. And I think that's something that we all have in common, that we have this recognition that ships are the things that connect us to a way. And what Rose George tells us in her wonderful book, 90% of Everything, is that we all live on islands. Some islands are just bigger than others. And that 90% of everything in this room was brought to us by ship. 90% of everything we're wearing, we eat, 90% of everything we buy was brought to us by ship. And the problem with shipping is that it is so fast, and it is so cheap, and it is so convenient that we forget that it carries a cost. My start was in the 80s, growing up in Comox, and in that time and in that place, there was truly a global environmental movement. It was in the air. You couldn't miss it. The Song of the Humpback Whale was the anthem of the Save the Whales movement. Sting sold me an acre of rainforest for $5. I love that model. I appreciate that model. It doesn't work in the ocean because the ocean, thankfully, is not for sale. It doesn't work in the ocean and for whales because the threats that the whales are facing now, unlike the 80s, are more complex than just whaling. So we need solutions that are more creative than just stopping the harpoons. And that's my job. That's what I do for a living. Much of this talk could be about fish. It could be about many other species that live in the ocean, but I study whales, so I'll talk about whales. I also study dolphins. Much of my work involves identifying the habitat needs of whales and the threats to that habitat, and trying to come up with creative solutions to threatening processes for critically endangered whale species. But if you take one message home from this talk, I want you to know it's that defining and protecting whale habitat is more complicated than simply drawing boxes on a map. We define whale habitat partly by what's in it. For example, we know that killer whale habitat has to include salmon. But we also define whale habitat by what's not in it, by things like chemical pollution and noise pollution. And I use noise pollution as an example because sound is as important to whales as vision is to humans. And so a lot of the work that my wife and I do and our team is to use math and physics to figure out how big is a whale's world. Sound travels farther in the ocean than light does, and so they get all of their information about mates and food and how to navigate through acoustic cues. I'll give you an example because that's better than talking. Here's the song of a humpback whale in Douglas Channel up on the north coast of BC near a place called Kitimat. won't talk about decibels or kilohertz, but I will tell you that that whale's world is measured in miles, not meters. And unfortunately, that works both ways. Whale song propagates for long distances, but so does ship noise. And I'll show you, because we're a visual species, this is how big the sound of a ship, a container ship, looks to a humpback whale as it transits Vancouver Island. So remember, you're here, and that's the acoustic footprint of a container ship as it comes up the west coast of the US, enters Juan de Fuca. The Gulf Islands are very good at buffering sound. And then, bam, it comes out the other side. Imagine if you're a whale on the other side of that passage. So these things look, the acoustic footprint of a container ship that are bringing us our cheap goods are producing a great deal of sound underwater. Here's a sound of a ship that is, for want of a better word, just a generic container ship. And my friend Scott Veers recorded this one, who maybe needs a little maintenance. "24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, our whales are listening to this." Now, of course, we all love killer whales here. They support the local economy. They're icons. They're in constant communication acoustically with members of their family. And so they're transmitting information. Each family has its own unique dialect. Each family has one song, one call that it makes that no other family of killer whales will make. And they're sharing information about where they are, the fish they're finding, where they're going, their navigation. They use this information about cultural dialects to choose mates. So it's very important information. And we're just now beginning to learn how they're using that sound. Unfortunately, we built shipping lanes through the most important habitats of our resident killer whales. And that constant noise from ships, as you see a ship approaching in the background, is shrinking the whale's world, shrinking the space over which, the range over which their song or their sounds can be heard. And ship noise is reducing acoustic habitat for killer whales in exactly the same way that clear-cut logging is reducing habitat available to grizzly bears if you clear-cut log coastal rainforest. If you put it all together, this is what it looks like or sounds like to a whale. This is what BC sounds like. And of course, if you are, I hope I get this right, living down here, like the southern resident killer whales in these urban waters, the southern resident killer whales are losing up to 97% of their opportunities to communicate with each other because of this constant background noise. We've raised the constant background noise. The good news is that our new research is discovering that there are still some pockets of water off the north coast of BC that are acoustic sanctuaries, that are refuges, that are still quiet and are important to whales. Of course, if every single industrial permit application is approved, then we're going to lose those acoustic sanctuaries before we even knew they existed. I want to leave on this note, ship noise is a wonderful problem to study if you're a scientist. That sounds weird, but I'll explain it. If, hypothetically, we screwed up and overfished the cod stocks on the East Coast, that could take decades to recover. If we Clear-cut, old-growth coastal rainforest, that could take centuries to recover. With ocean noise, the problem goes away as soon as you remove the sound source. And what's even more exciting is that it's not necessarily just a cost. You can do things now. You can ask ships to slow down through important whale habitats, just like we ask drivers to slow down as they're going through a school zone. You can identify those squeaky ships and say, hey, you need maintenance. We're doing that work. You can, if you think forward, say Canada is one of the few countries that's still investing in shipbuilding contracts, and Canada could corner the market on building the quieter ships that the world is going to need, because someone has to build them and the technology exists. It's not a cost, it's a business opportunity. This is the map of global shipping, and of course you can see that this is zoomed into BC, but you can see that although we're used to thinking of Canada as a repository of a steward of fresh water, we're also a steward of some of the last quiet oceans left in the Northern Hemisphere. And I think as we have increasingly busy and chaotic and hectic lives, there will come a time when we start to think of quiet as a natural resource that has value. We've got it. Sorry, I have one last thing, which is we love this quote, we're hewers of wood and drawers of water, but what we can be are stewards of vibrant oceans and builders of the quiet, fuel-efficient ships that the world is going to need in future. We're doing this work to identify, to do the science, but we're all going to need to work together to keep the quiet areas quiet and to make the noisy areas less noisy. Thank you.